What's up, YouTube? Static in the Attic. This is actually part two of a video where my recording software freaked out. If I can figure out how, I will slap right front and center there a link for you to click on to be able to watch the first part of this video, because you really are coming in halfway through a formulation of thoughts, a flowing thought process here and tying things together. Just a quick recap. We have histories from all around the world, people watching the sky for thousands and thousands of years, a tradition saying that a lot of tribes are actually from stars. And over in Africa, we saw that the Dogon people have a history saying that they came from the star Sirius B thousands of years ago, and they have a god in their traditions called Dagon, which is the exact same Dagon god, false god of the ancient Canaanites, that when the Ark of the Covenant was brought into the presence of this false god Dagon, he fell down not once but twice in front of the Ark of the Covenant. That is Samuel 5, I believe. We also did a brief introduction into plasma events and petroglyphs. I haven't got to the part where we're tying all of this together, and I want you guys to know that in upcoming videos I will be putting out a very long history that we have from around the world of just, it's straight up a plasma event. There is no other way of looking at it. I mean, all these cultures say that there were world-ending events in our past, and I literally have so much information that I'm going to have to break it down into the types of catastrophe it was, whether it was earthquakes or floods or plasma events, because they're all there. They're everywhere, these cyclical cycles. So let's keep the timeline straight about things for sure, though, here. Now, we're going to go down to Peru, and I got a book called The Secret of the Incas from William Sullivan. He is an anthropologist that has been working down there, living with the living descendants of the Incas and piecing this stuff together his whole life. He's dedicated his whole life to this. But let me read you the first part of his book before we even get into it. When I first began to read the history of the Inca Empire, I was surprised to learn that it had existed for less than a century before being utterly destroyed by the Spanish conquistadors. More startling still were the genuinely peculiar circumstances surrounding the demise of this South American kingdom, an empire built by military conquest which stretched down the spine of the Andes from modern-day Colombia to southern Chile and from the Pacific coast to the eastern foothills of the Andes. Into the midst of this mighty state, a Spanish expeditionary force of 170 adventurers blundered late in the year 1532 and succeeded in subjugating an empire of some 6 million souls. Were this story fiction, it would be considered the product of a Baroque imagination. So here's one of the leading anthropologists on the subject of the Inca, and he had a really hard time reconciling this. And unfortunately, I do feel sorry for him, because he spent his whole life studying the Inca, trying to make it fit into the paradigm of a set of letters from Hernan Cortez to a king over in Spain. And that is the entire history that we get for the Americas. So no wonder it was a hard time for him to reckon with that. Okay, before we go any further, let's get a few things straight about who did what. These are called the Inca walls down in Cuzco, but at this point, I don't believe archaeologists and anthropologists are even claiming that the Inca built that base layer, the megalithic, huge stones that are at the base. All of that you see up at the top in the left, that was done by later civilizations, the Wari and the Inca. The Wari were the civilization before the Inca. The official dating on that is, I believe, 500 AD up until about 1000 AD. And you guys can look all you want. I don't even see one single archaeologist out there that has even taken a guess to say who built Puma Punku. So all throughout Peru, we see the ruins of the ancient monuments, the ancient advanced megalithic monuments, and then the Inca, and well, first the Wari, and then the Inca have built on top of that. To be completely fair about this, the official dating for Pachacuti Inca's time, which we're going to get into his story, I want you to understand that Inca is the name of the people, and also it is a title of the king. So Pachacuti Inca is saying King Pachacuti. His time on the official dating is around 1420. The way they come to that number is they do have a lineage of the kings back to back, and they just attribute 30 years of reign to each king. So if that's off by 5 years over the process of, I can't remember how many Incas there were, I'll pull it up for you here, but over the process of 10 Incas, then that's 50 years off. And at this point, I am a very firm believer that there was a catastrophe at the beginning of the Incas' time here. This would have been the catastrophe of the 1300s, where we had the Black Death over in Europe that coincided with all of the earthquakes and the comet. The same thing over in China. In Americas, we had the Cahokia civilization fall, the Anasazi disappeared, Chaco Canyon wiped out. Guys, it all points to the same thing at that point in time. So I want you to understand the difference between the ancient structures that were there first and the Inca that built on top of them. And once you understand the story of the Inca prophecy, then it all starts to make a little more sense. So let's start filling in the blanks here. The creator god Viracocha made the earth and sky, and he created stone giants to live in it. After a while, the giants became lazy and quarrelsome, and Viracocha decided to destroy them. Some he turned back to stone, and these stone statues still exist at Tiahuanaco and Pucara. He destroyed the rest with a great flood. When the flood subsided, it left the lakes Titicaca and Popu, and it left seashells on the Altiplano at elevations of 3,660 meters. Viracocha saved 2 stone giants from the flood, and with their help created people his own size. He reached down into Lake Titicaca and drew out the sun and moon to provide light so he could admire his new creation. In those days, the moon was even brighter than the sun, but the sun grew jealous and threw ashes onto the moon's face. That video's coming, guys, because I have multiple accounts that the moon was the first sun and that it grew too bright and scorched the earth and it had to be extinguished. Just like in the Bible, they say that God created a whole nother creation first, and that it was, the wording they use here is lazy and quarrelsome. They were vile creatures, and so God sent a flood and wiped all of them out. All created things perished except for a man and a woman who floated in a box, just like the story of Noah's Ark. When the flood subsided, the floating box was driven by the wind to Tiahuanaco, about 200 miles from Cusco, where the Creator told them to dwell. The Creator molded new people from clay, just like the Bible. This creation is made from clay. If you look at the Muslim tradition, they say that the first creation, the jinn, was made from a smokeless fire, and then mankind was second, made from clay. So all these traditions agree that mankind was made from clay, the second creation. On each figure, the Creator painted dress and hairstyle, and he gave the nations distinct language, songs, and seeds to plant. When he had brought them to life, he ordered them into the earth to travel underground and emerge from caves, springs, tree trunks, etc. in their various homes. I'm not going to go into detail here, but they have the tradition of the cave Petroglyphs, to where during the Great Flood, Manco Capo emerged after the Great Flood. So they have a very clear flood story in their histories. But keep in mind that the worldwide flood was ancient history to these guys by the time of these events of the 1300s. Now, let me read from the book from 1671, and they say their histories mention also of giants who formerly inhabited the promontory St. Helena, were each 4 times bigger than an ordinary man, and fed not only on the greatest sea monsters, but devoured each of them 30 Peruvians at a meal. The stone images of these giants are at this day to be seen not far from Puerto Viejo. They likewise kept for a long time annual feast days on which they lamented the loss of the giants, which, as they say, was as follows. So they're lamenting the loss of the giants. But here's what they say happened. A youth glittering in glory like the sun descended from heaven and breathed fire, which rending the rocks so terrified the giants, they fled into a deep cave where they were all killed. A youth glittering in glory like the sun descended from heaven and breathed fire. Now, we're talking about a tribal people here, guys. What do you think that they are trying to describe here? I don't think they are using metaphor in any way, shape, or form. I think they are very bluntly describing of an event that happened. Something came down out of the sky, breathing fire that rended the rocks asunder. Let me give you a little backstory before we get to Pachacuti Inca. This was a prophecy by Viracocha Inca, King Viracocha, whom Pachacuti Inca was descended from. So don't confuse Viracocha Inca with the god Viracocha. After a certain number of Incas had reigned, there would come to the land a people never before seen who would destroy the religion and empire of the natives. He ordered that it should be regarded as a tradition among the royal princes and that it should not be divulged to the common people because it was not right to profane that which had come through divine revelation, nor was it wise to allow it to be known that hereafter the Incas would lose their religion and their empire and would fall from high estate. For this reason, nothing more was said of this prophecy until Inca Huanacapa openly referred to it a little before his death. Now, Huanacapa was about 4 generations down. The Indians gave the name of Viracocha to the Spaniards because they caused the fulfillment of the prophecy. Now, elaborate on that a little bit more, they gave the name of Viracocha to Father Maduro, a Spanish priest that was down there. And reluctantly, they gave him this information. Now, even William Sullivan here, the author of this book, is very clear that the Inca have changed their histories for political reasons, just like anybody else in the world. So this part of the prophecy, you can kind of, it stands a little bit alone because you will see the important part of what happened with Pachacuti Inca right here in this. In those days, Pachacuti's time, there was a great famine which lasted for 7 years, and during that time the seed produced no fruit. Many died of hunger, and it is even said that some ate their own children. So when I hear the stories of the cannibals all around America, I'm just thinking of a zombie apocalypse that would happen nowadays. I think some people would definitely turn to cannibalism, and I think by the time Columbus and that crew cruised over here, it was a reconnaissance mission, and they were finding people trying to rebuild their civilizations. In that time, there existed great loss of life among the Indians from hunger, thirst, and pestilence, because as punishment, God withheld the rain for 7 years, some say for 10. There were cataclysms, earthquakes, and many storms, it being now the occupation of all to weep and bury the dead. So after the 7 to 10 years of drought and everybody starving to death and the earthquakes, then things started to get really bad. Above the city in a place called Sapi, a person dressed in red with a trumpet in one hand and a staff in the other appeared, and that before he appeared, it had rained heavily for a month, pouring down day and night without surcease. Keep in mind, this is an older writing. And that they feared that they would have a world, that the world would turn over. Now, this is the exact terminology that the Hopi use when they're talking about the end of a world age. They say the world turns over. Does it sound like anything to anybody? And it's what the Inca call a Pachacuti. That's why I was giving you the background on the prophecy, because this Inca was named Pachacuti because they knew that this time was coming in advance. So like I've said many times, all histories are comparative histories, and they date Pachacuti Inca around 1438, and all of these things happening that I just described, while meanwhile over in Europe in the 1350s, you've got the exact same thing. 20 years of freaking earthquakes from Europe to China, comet in the sky, plagues, earthquakes, famine. I mean, what more can you say? So I am definitely going with the range of 600 to 700 years ago was a global catastrophe here. Check out what happens next. Above the city, in a place called Sapi, a person dressed in red with a trumpet in one hand and a staff in another appeared, and that before he appeared, it had rained heavily for a month, pouring down day and night without surcease, and that they feared that the world would turn over, what they called a Pachacuti. Now, this is the exact same terminology that the Hopi of North America, Arizona, use for the end of a world age. They call it the world turning over, same as the Inca way, way down in South America. And that this person, the person in red with the trumpet in his hand, had come on the water, and that he had begun 4 leagues from Cuzco. The prince went out to meet him where they had agreed, and he pleaded with the apparition that he not play his trumpet, because they feared that if he did blow it, the whole world would turn over, and that they be brothers, and that in fact he did not blow it. So when this apparition appeared, Pachacuti Inca went out to plead with Viracocha. To give you the long story of the book here, he was praying to Viracocha to not cause another Pachacuti, the world to turn over. And in doing so, he was asking that this apparition not play its trumpet. So this is indicating that they have a past memory of the trumpet blowing. And this matches exactly what we have of lithographs from over in Europe. Anyway, all of that is going to be for another video. I'm going to finish the main purpose of this video. It was all just a ploy to show my crappy vacation pictures. Ha! So, I was recently out here in Anza Borrego. In light of all of that I have just covered, now let's look at the petroglyphs that we find out here. So first, let's take a look at the Birkeland currents here. You have the magnetic fields. Just think of the aurora borealis, the northern lights. You have fluctuating magnetic fields, and they cause this phenomena in the sky. Here we have some recent modern day photos of this, but evidently back in the day, these were clearly visible according to the 2 images right in the center there. And then that big streak coming down to the right, I would say, is the comet or a plasma type discharge there. This is obviously referring to the sky. You got the sun right there. Now let's jump over about 30 miles away from this site to a different cave over here. And if you look to the right there, I'm sorry, I don't have a cursor, you can see the sun, and the sun follows all the way up under the rock there. And then you will see it again at the upper left of your screen. That's the path of the sun pretty clearly across the sky right there. That cross right in the center, outlined in white, which looks to have been done recently. This stuff is actually, I've enhanced the photo a little bit. It shows up a lot better on camera than it does in person, but it is remarkably well preserved, and it is officially listed by the anthropologist there. In the center there, I believe that is the North Star, and you're looking at the constellations centered around the North Star. What they are doing is signifying an exact location, and like I said at the beginning of this video, I'm not a fan of the ancient aliens theory of things here, but there's something to this. They have the googly-eyed monsters coming from this section of the sky. Now, I don't know. This could be a plasma discharge. I don't know on this one. I really don't. But I do think that what we're looking at here is referencing the sky, the center point there being the North Pole, and they are indicating that something has happened over in this region. These guys knew the sky very well. So then about 10 miles from there, you find the Cave of the Blue Sun. I mean, do I really have to say anything here? This is obviously referencing the sky. So between anthropologists, archaeologists, and even the mainstream academia historians, within 100-year time frame or so, we have catastrophes all around the world 700 years ago. You just got to put the puzzle pieces together. Now, I watched a documentary on the Kumeyaay that are from this area. Now, the geologists and the archaeologists found out that this Lake Cahuilla used to be out here. The living descendant Kumeyaay have no knowledge of this lake being out here, but they have found the shoreline, and I got to go out here and find this and check it out, because they have all of these pits dug in there. And these guys are scratching their head trying to figure out how these fish traps work, because it's just a lake, right? And it doesn't make any sense to have any pits, and they're trying to explain it by the way the salmon run and this and that. And I'm sitting here looking at this and I'm just going, guys, doesn't it make it a lot more sense if you're looking at an ocean shoreline and the tides come in, the fish get caught in the traps, and the tide goes out on the island of California? I don't know. Just a thought. Anyway, that's it for this one. I love you guys. Take care of yourselves out there. We are all one. Static out.